Years ago, when lecturing about the tarot, I found it practical and advisable to divide the subject matter of each arcanum into separate lessons, which were then much more readily assimilated during the time given for a lecture than if the whole arcanum were dealt with at once. The student will find the same method used here, as it proved to be so successful in the past. Hence, several lessons will belong to each of the major arcana, but in this work everything has been greatly augmented and revised, with enlarged chapters incorporating new material based on latest experience. I have tried to limit the number of drawings to the bare minimum, giving only the really important schemes and pentacles. Two reasons for this are: 1. If the student works properly and realizes the meaning of the symbols given, he will easily extend them, if he finds this useful for his mental processes. So, for example, the special unfolding of Solomon's star and of the pentagram as sometimes encountered in old works about the tarot may be found independently, and therefore may yield certain profit for an occultist. 2. These unfoldings do not belong to the basic truths of the tarot, as do the pentacles of its arcana, and they do not provide much initiatory material, if given in a ready form. If you are successfully initiated into all three meanings of Fabre d'Olvay's mystical triangles, your broadened and enlightened mind will not need many graphical schemes in order to approach closer to the very core of the initiation of the Western tradition. Here, of course, I mean the supermental abilities of cognition without thinking, which is the genuine intuition. Now, I would like to stress that the tarot in itself does not expound any definite spiritual doctrine, but rather has the purpose of expanding the abilities of the student, that is, to teach him an infallible method for developing and using his mental faculties. From the occult point of view, the man of average intelligence is not well prepared for the realization and solving of the deep problems of the microcosm and macrocosm. No doubt, some people have had brilliant flashes of mental understanding and even intuition, but all such are only of a sporadic character and could hardly be called controlled abilities or guided intuition. That is because there are so many different occult currents and conceptions, which we can easily observe in our own epoch. The mental machine of the tarot tries to fill this gap and to help every earnest seeker who cannot as yet follow any direct spiritual path, as taught by the great teachers of humanity, but who feels an urgent need to examine everything for himself and to reconcile his mind to the supposed highest aims of human attainment. Many people have an unquenchable thirst and curiosity to know mentally much more than recognized philosophical or psychological studies can offer them. Some want to systematize the degree of occult knowledge which they already possess, while others are keen to unveil certain secrets which lie hidden behind the security walls surrounding the main occult problems. For all such, the tarot offers a unique possibility to achieve their various aims and at the same time educate their minds and open quite new vistas before them. Of course, the tarot of the second half of the 20th century is probably not the same as taught in the underground initiatory crypts in Egypt 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, or in the secret chambers of the Great Pyramid, and in the subterranean temple between the paws of the Sphinx, simply because we are not the ancient Egyptians. Our minds have certainly evolved a little since those far-off days. That is, we are, as a mass, much more intelligent than the corresponding ancient people, for whom the knowledge of their primitive and cumbersome art of writing and reading was the rare privilege of comparatively few, while the masses remained uneducated. Adding a little to our fantasy, supported, anyway, by the few reports which we have about the methods of ancient initiations, we can imagine a group of young candidates slowly walking among the pillars, in the half-dim light of the colored oil lamps, under the leadership of a majestic-looking high priest, who in short, half-filled sentences, explains to them the mystical truths of the arcana and the other symbols around them. This method was followed by the ancient occultists in order to prevent any insufficiently developed candidates from slipping through the safety barriers erected for the purpose of screening the aspirants. Many teachings were given in quite an enigmatic outer form, and the candidates had to cope successfully with them before they passed to the higher class. Now, it is different. The invention of printing has enormously popularized all knowledge, and the unrestricted publication of millions of books at the present time apparently puts everything within the reach of all. But if we look closely, and with an unprejudiced eye, we will agree that the invisible veil still exists. Although there are no secret crypts buried deep under the tightly guarded temples and pyramids, for now it lies inside ourselves. The most elevated of spiritual truths have been expounded by the advanced sons of humanity during the last 2,000 years, and in spite of the Gospels on the love of Christ, hatred and murder are still far from being eliminated. What is the cause? The same veil of inner unripeness and ignorance, which prevents the practice of truth as revealed in the Gospels, also prevents unsuitable persons from entering the ancient temple of the tarot, even if almost everything in it is exposed without any artificial barriers. Anyway, every occultist knows about this unwritten but very efficient law. Now, on the other side of the coin we have, for example, a primitive native of Central Africa or New Guinea, who certainly does not know anything about the manufacture of firearms, or even of the physical laws which determine the functioning of a rifle or revolver. But once a weapon is placed in his hands, and it is explained how to insert the cartridge and pull the trigger, he is capable of using the weapon to kill without the need of any other knowledge about it. In occultism, there are secret technicalities, which sometimes can work even if placed in ignorant hands, similarly to the foregoing example. In this book, some of them may be indicated closely enough for use, but only those which cannot be employed under any conditions for wrongful, that is evil, purposes. Others which do not give such a guarantee will be mentioned only up to the point where their application begins, but no further. Paul Sadir, in his unique book Initiations, states that his master, Monsieur Andreas, once told him that all the crimes and evil arising from the wrongful or malicious use of, say, mesmerism, weigh heavily on the inventor of that method, Dr. Mesmer himself. Such is the law. So, it can be imagined what terrible debts he has to pay for the past, as well as for the future misuse of his discovery. That is why no occult book of any value, written by an honest author who is conscious of his responsibility, will reveal dangerous practices. Such authors are aware of the fact that men are much more eager to misuse occult or psychical powers than to use them for good and unselfish purposes. In two of my other books, Concentration and Occultism and Spiritual Paths, I have spoken extensively about this, that is, about some particular types of magic. Referring the reader to these sources, I would like to mention briefly that in this 20th century, magic is still not dead, and this also includes the so-called black magic. There is one thing against which every black magician will always fight. It is his unmasking. He will use everything he can in order to avenge this, and to render harmless to him the person who reveals his true quality. Nowadays, the lower types of occultists, who have only egoistic and material aims, invariably try to pass as great souls, spiritual teachers, or perfect masters. It has so happened that the writer has openly expressed his opinion about some of these rogues, referring to them in his published articles, and also in correspondence with some of their misguided disciples. In due time, the expected reactions came. Strong efforts from the black side have been made in order to harm him, and to make any further work impossible. Whoever has read Occultism and Spiritual Paths will know more about the means and methods used in such cases. Here, I shall only mention about the fact that if a photograph of a man or his signature is available, the necessary contact may be well established with the body of the prospective victim by the magician, providing he knows the techniques and possesses some willpower. In this particular case, the eyes and other organs were attacked, but as soon as the origin of the ailments were discovered, the aggression was countered and frustrated. See the chapter, Magic, in Occultism and Spiritual Paths. In spite of all this, there have been some books published which reveal sufficient data to give the keys to some occult experiments. I had them about 30 years ago, and learned quite a few things from them. Fortunately, They are no longer available, but there remains a large volume by Papists about the practices of ceremonial magic, in which enough material is given to enable a persistent and strong-willed person to perform some real experiments, which sometimes seem to be harmless for those around them, but not necessarily for the performer. See, in Days of Great Peace, the chapter My Path to Maharshi. A special magic book is required, which must be a purely personal one, compiled and written by the operator himself, at certain hours of the day and night, according to astrological conditions, and which takes several months to prepare.